Now, one of the biggest concerns, and you've expressed concern about it on radio and television and the newspapers, is the threat of New York State worker layoffs, which would hit the capital region big time, but also would hit Syracuse, Buffalo, Binghamton, and all the other cities. And when you have those people out of work, they're not spending money at the stores, and so the stores have to cut back on their employees, and then those employees aren't spending money where they would normally go. It's the economic multiplier in reverse. How do things look? Do you think there's going to be those layoffs, or maybe things are better?
I would hope not. Certainly, we in the legislature, as you know, have no control over that. The governor, as chief executive of the state and in charge of all the departments, makes those decisions without any input from us. But at least when we did the budget, no layoffs occurred as a result of the budget.
Right.
My understanding is now that the governor is in negotiations with the major unions dealing with this issue. But at one time, there was talk of 6,000 layoffs. I think that is unconscionable, particularly when the economy is not in great shape yet. And where would these people go? And the trickle-down effect of the economy, as you're saying, in terms of purchasing power and dollars out there, let alone the hardship to individuals and their families, is something I don't think we should be doing at this point in time.
Now, one of the things that is a big issue in New York State is the property tax cap. It's been passed by the Senate, and the governor is for it. Do you think eventually that's going to happen, or it maybe not this year?
No, I do. I think it will happen this year before session concludes. It may not be all what the governor wants. It may not be all that I want. But this would be a major statewide law and passed by both houses and signed by the governor. And it's going to take some thought and some deliberation. I like the idea of capping real property taxes. Who doesn't? It sounds good politically. It's easy. But looking at the details, it becomes a little more complicated than that. In the sense of we do not want to, at least I do not want to take action that unnecessarily binds school districts or cities, towns, and villages across the state. There are some costs over which they have no control or very little control. For example, pension costs.
Right. That
can increase 5, 8, 10% a year, and yet our real property tax cap would say they cannot raise taxes above 2.5%, for example. So maybe we should look at relieving those municipalities of some or all of those costs over which they have no control as part of the solution. So I think what will happen is that we will have a cap, but I think the details are still being negotiated, and I think when something is done, there will be something beneficial, but I don't think it'll be so restrictive that other levels of government cannot operate and perform the functions that we think they should perform.
Talking about taxes, you talk about employment and unemployment. How do you think New York State is doing economically right now? Are things starting to turn around and we're headed in the right direction?
Oh, I think they are. I really do. And upstate has issues. There's no question about that. And we in the Capital District are somewhat isolated from some of that in upstate. But in general, I think New York State is doing better than it had been. And we predict that when the latest figures come out from the State Department of the Treasury here, that the revenues will be picking up significantly with the April reporting that we expect anytime soon. So revenues are increasing, the pace of economic activity is increasing as well, and that bodes well for the budget and the finances of the state, but also for the people of the great state.
Also, you mentioned
excuse me,
things were a little different for us in the Albany, Schenectady, Troy area. Syracuse, Buffalo, Binghamton, those municipalities have really been hit hard. Are things starting to turn around for them as well?
I don't think it's happening as quickly as they would like, or as quickly
anyone would like.
As anyone would like, exactly. Or as quickly as it's happened here in the Capital District. But we're trying to do some initiatives around the State University of New York, which of course has a presence in Buffalo and Binghamton, especially with the university centers, and of course Syracuse has its own university, and community colleges as well. So we're looking at ways to prime that pump in a sense and help with the economy in those regions as well. It's important to our members in the Assembly, and we hear it all the time. There's a limit to what government can do, particularly when our budgets are restricted, but the effort certainly must be made.
Use the term prime that pump, which makes me think of gasoline prices. What sort of an impact are the high gasoline prices starting to have on the state of New York?
Well, that's it. We thought things were coming along quite well nationally and within the state, but then now the gas issue certainly has put a damper on spending and people's attitudes. You know, in a sense, the feeling of optimism and a feeling of change for the better, that psychologically means something in terms of the economy. And yet when we have a damper, which is just not imaginary but real with the gas prices, it has a tendency to slow things down, and that's been unfortunate, I think, with the latest surge in gas prices across the nation and state.
Now, one thing that happened a couple of years ago when we had the high gasoline prices, and people are talking about it again, is staycation, which means basically people stay close to their home and go to tourist attractions within 30 to 60 miles of their house, which, you know, makes sense. But at the same time, that's going to be devastating to the hotel, motel industry, isn't it?
Oh, yes. It, you know, people that may stay locally, they may, for example, go up to the Adirondacks here or the Catskills, but don't forget people from Massachusetts and Pennsylvania may not come up either. They may not come up to Lake George where they had in the past. So it's not a plus altogether when the gas prices are this high, and I think we all suffer. It may be good that people stay locally, but when you look at the big picture, that affects all of us in a negative way for sure.
Well, tourism is a big industry in New York State.
Absolutely, yes. And I believe last year New York City had a record in terms of the number of tourists, chiefly international. But you know, that is a big draw in New York City, but the entire state has its attractions.
Rail has become more important in New York State. One of the busiest corridors in the nation is between the Rensselaer train station and New York City. Also, a lot of rail traffic going out through Utica, Syracuse, Rochester, and Buffalo. What is the future of high-speed rail in New York State?
Well, I think we've been talking about this for generations. It is a joke, I think, in this country that we have not done more on high-speed rail. I took a trip to China last year, and from Shanghai, we went on high-speed rail to the airport, a major airport, 150 miles away. We made it. I don't know the exact time, but traveling 200 and some odd miles an hour, it was a 20-minute ride.
Wow.
And if China and Shanghai can do it, why can't we? President Obama had an initiative for infrastructure improvements that included high-speed rail, but I believe that was shot down with the budget compromises that they had to make. But we should not be where we are. As everyone knows, the trains in Europe operate much better than ours. We've talked about the high-speed rail corridor between Albany and New York City for generations. Nothing much has changed. We could do a lot more. It would be job creation. It would be good for the environment, and just makes sense. And yet the commitment isn't there at the federal level, and that's unfortunate. We at the state can be a partner to some extent, but the cost of a project of that magnitude is just so high that we're not in a position to do that. But with the federal leadership, we should be a partner. It should happen between New York City and Albany, and who knows what beyond that.
With the new technology taking over, we've developed some waste problems, and this year New York State passed the E-Waste Recycling Act, which took effect, I believe, in April of this year. Want to talk about that a little bit, and what do you hope that it accomplishes?
Well, you're right. We are burying too much and burning too much and trying to do something with our solid waste, the electronic waste stream that we have out there. This is an attempt to deal with that, realizing technology has changed, and we must adapt as well to deal with all the stuff that we consume, use, and throw away. And we do an Earth Day program of bills in the Assembly every year trying to highlight whether it's styrofoam, e-waste, or other areas that we could improve upon. And again, it's an issue of consensus with the Senate and the governor, but we're moving in a direction certainly to have more recycling and try to reduce what we are dumping in the landfills across the state.
Another big energy issue right now is hydrofracking in New York State, and I understand the Marcellus shale area in New York State has 490 trillion cubic feet of natural gas, and I guess this is extracting natural gas from the shale. How is that going? Is that going to happen in New York State?
Well, I don't know. In fact, we had some demonstrators in the Capitol recently that were quite vocal against hydrofracking, and the emotions on this issue dealing with the environment, as you know, are quite high. I'm supporting a bill that we passed and to back off on hydrofracking until the State Department of Environmental Conservation has done a complete review of the consequences, the risks, etc. And I believe that's a 4-month process. But to give them a chance to look at it more clearly, so not make a decision to outlaw it right now or to permit it right now, because certainly we need all the energy we can within the state and the nation.
Right.
But there's got to be that balance between what is safe and what is not. And I'm not an expert in that area, but I believe we should hold off, see what the department says at Environmental Conservation when they do an exhaustive study, see what their recommendations and proposals are, and then move forward accordingly.
I understand the major concern is that there would be a problem with the water, that the hydrofracking would cause problems, but I guess it's been going on for a while in Pennsylvania, and so far there hasn't been a problem.
Right. This is not anything new. It's more of an issue lately, and there are some that say the water is not in danger. There are ways to protect that. But our water supply is critical too, so is the energy issue. So we've got to balance this out and take a good look and not endanger drinking water. But at the same time, if there's a way for us to help reduce our energy costs and make us less dependent on foreign oil, I like that idea too.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we all want a clean environment. But at the same time, you hear people saying we shouldn't be drilling for oil in the United States. Then there is the anti-nuclear power movement, which we can understand, and then there's the anti-hydrofracking, movement. I mean, are we going to go back to the Wild West days of the 1800s and have oil lamps? I mean,
and yet we all consume more. We all want to consume more, and
exactly.
No matter where we go, air conditioning, and there's no limit to anything. So we can't have it all.
Right.
We've got to make some choices, and hopefully the choices are intelligent choices based on real data and just not the emotion of the moment.
There's a proposal for a new law requiring drivers to check yes or no when they renew their driver's license or get their first driver's license in New York State for organ donations, whether or not you want to be an organ donor. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I don't think we should force that concept on anyone. I believe now you can opt into it,
right,
whether you want to do that or not. But I don't think we should do anything that makes an assumption that if you fail to check the box, then you have agreed to donate your organs. I think it should be an affirmative act by an individual to say, yes, I want this done. And we should not have an assumption that everyone who gets a license wants it done unless you check no. I think that places an undue burden on people. It's a very personal decision. I applaud those that do check off and decide to donate their organs, but nonetheless, people may have religious and other beliefs against it, and I believe it should be an affirmative act and not something that would happen automatically unless you chose otherwise.